Imagine for a moment, and if you want of course, that you have to cut a dovetail. You're in the process of restoring an old lathe and you need to make a new cross slide. Now, I don't need to make a new cross slide, this one is perfectly fine, but this is just an example. I made a little sketch here on my blackboard and I made it upside down on purpose, because this is the fixed part of the top slide, upside down of course, and this is the part we have to make, and because we have to cut from the top side in, of course I drew it upside down. Now it could be very easy. Take a dovetail cutter, go to the milling machine and start cutting, right? And even if we don't have the right dovetail cutter, it won't be too complicated to make a cutter and use one of these small triangular inserts, which are of course 3 times 60 degrees. But there's one little detail. The angle I have to cut is not 60 degrees. We can conclude that making this part is not possible. So, thanks for watching. Wait, maybe it is possible. After all, we have a secret weapon here. I have a very nice piece of material here that I already squared up, and I only gonna make the dovetail. All the rest of the features, no need, because as I said, I don't need to make a new cross slide. This one is perfectly fine, but this is just an example. The ideal of course is to use a vise a bit like this one. But the problem is, I don't have one. And I also think, using a vise, that's for pussy. Before we install the workpiece, it's maybe a good idea to set the tool slide at the right angle. And of course, make sure that the machine doesn't crash, because it's well known that shapers can be autodestructive. Bolt the original part on the table. Set it in line with the ram. Install something straight. Setting the tool slide parallel, using the hammer of course. I suppose until now all this wasn't too complicated. The tool slide is in line. Now it's not perfect, but it's good enough. So let's all take all this setup apart again and install the workpiece. And to do so I first installed here a stop that I indicated in line with the ram. And another stop right here to prevent the part from escaping. So my part comes against this one, which means it will be repeatable. Because the plan is to cut first one side of the dovetail. When it's finished, I flip my part around, locate it back in place and cut the other side. What in my opinion is easier than setting the tool slide the other way, the other angle. Because working on this side of the machine and then feeding by hand on this side, that doesn't work. So flip around, it will be. Before I install my cutting tool, maybe it's interesting to know how to set the clapper box. The angle I have to cut 55 degrees. My cutting tool 40 degrees. So there is clearance both sides, no problem. On the backstroke, my cutting tool has to lift. But while lifting, of course, we don't want it to dig in this surface, and we don't want it to dig in this surface. So the easiest way to set the clapper box is if we take this as the center line of the pivot pin of the clapper, yeah, we set the tool in between, we cut the angle in two, and the clapper box is also in the same line, which means if my tool lifts, it will clear both surfaces at the same time. So if I leave the clapper box as is now, while feeding down this side of the cutting tool, this side will rub on the surface, this surface of the dovetail. So we give it a bit angle, cut this angle we have to cut in two, more or less is good enough. Clearance is clearance. So let's do this for example. I install the tool, and because there's not much clearance here on the clamp and there's almost no material I can cut out in this setup, I will change. First I will put the tool straight, rough out the middle part, and then set it in an angle and cut out this corner. Right, everything is set up and ready to go. Of course I had to change the angle again of the clapper box, because the V we're gonna cut this way, clapper box this way, but because we're roughing out the V with the same tool, the V is this way, so we cut the angle in two, which means straight. To avoid to cut both sides of the tool, I will feed down at the same time as the machine is feeding this way. So in theory it will be only one side of the tool that cuts. Now because this is in an angle, normally it doesn't cut much on both sides, but this machine doesn't like heavy cuts. Let's The middle part is roughed out, as you can see. And to take measurements, of course, with the calipers it's not really easy. And with the other side, because it's in an angle here, it's not easy. But there's a nice little trick. Take something straight. This is a piece of high-speed steel. Don't take a measurement, we don't care. But set a 0, put the thing on here, and now it's really easy to take measurements. I suppose you knew this trick, but just in case you didn't, okay? Now to have some clearance here between my tool holder and the clamp, I had to regrind a bit my cutting tool. The original cutting face thing is on this side, and now I put it all in a special angle, but it is still 40 degrees. And before we start cutting in this thing, maybe it's a good idea to see how we're gonna take measurements. The internet tells us that if we take 2 pins, same radius, both. Now they don't have to be same radius, but it's easier to work with. 2 times exactly same pin. And we put them, one in the female on the inside, because of course on the outside is not possible. And in the male we put on the outside, because of course on the inside is not possible. This distance is the same, so we do the same on this side. One moment, please. The theory that this guy with his cheap glasses tried to squeeze in your ears is not correct. The pins works indeed if you want to copy. Make this part, copy. Then you can measure with the pins. If you base your measurements, for example, on the male to make the female, what this dude tells you is not correct. What is correct, of course, is the depth must be the same. So let's continue, listen what the soup. So we can see here that between the male and the female there is 3 millimeters of difference. But the 2 parts fit together as if they were made one for each other. So what's happening? Let me show you. Let's bring the thing closer, and I hope you can see that the dovetail on the female is deeper than the dovetail on the male. Which means that this system of measuring works perfectly fine. Only if this distance equals this distance. If one of both is different, it doesn't work. Conclusion. I'm making this part. Let's put it aside. But for the moment I cut my groove here, the depth of this part. So I can take measurements between the flat faces and the 55 degrees, because this and this same. And when it fits after, I can choose to do whatever I want, to dig in a little bit deeper or not. So let's go for it. One side is now finished and nothing. Let's do the other side. A little bit more. And there you have it. And there's not too much slop in it, so I think that's good. No vice, no complicated calculations, and only one cutting tool. And still, it's possible to make something that works. Of course, with a Monday morning hangover, it will be a little bit complicated, but you see it's possible. So, for example, if you want to make tool holders for your quick change tool post, stop hesitating and go for it.